Thank you, everybody, for gathering this evening or maybe afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. My name is Jonathan Lee. I am a Presbyterian for Earth Care intern for this season, and I'm happy to be leading us through this call. I just would like to remind everybody about some basic Zoom protocol. We've been doing this for a year, so I think it's in us, but if you could remember to stay on mute unless you're asking a question. We will have a time for Q&A with our speaker, Dave Grace, at the end of his presentation. So if you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can wait until that Q&A session. For our new guests and our returning, some of our returning people who might have only been to one or two of these meetings in the past, we want to remind all of you that these meetings, while some of the contents of the discussion can be applicable to individual church Earth Care ministries, the intentions of the group is to meet for presbytery level activism and work. And so, Jane, are you able to share the purpose and the strategy, please? Yeah.
I might get it right this time.
Wonderful. So again, the purpose of these Greening Your Presbytery calls is to, I'll let you do it.
I think we're good. There we go.
Yeah. The purpose is to collaborate with individuals and different churches to become better stewards of God's creation. And we will do this by forming Earth Care teams at the presbytery level to engage and support congregations in integrating creation care into their church's Christian witness and ministry. And so we have been meeting every second Tuesday of the month. So we will have another meeting next in May. If there's a particular topic or question that you would like us to respond to, feel free to put it in the chat or email our contact with those ideas, and we'll get those back to you. Let me see. Those seem to be the announcements for now. So I will turn it over to Nancy, who is going to offer an opening prayer.
Thank you, Jonathan. My apologies. I don't seem to get my camera to work, but it's good to be with you this evening. Let us gather together, and as we gather, to draw strength from Psalm 95, verses 5 through 11. In his hands are the depth of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down in worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. And let us open our hearts together in prayer. Gracious God, Lord of all creation, we bow in gratitude before you this day. Thank you for the earth bursting forth with vivid color. Thank you for the rivers and streams to provide water to sustain us. Thank you for the power of energy that surrounds us, the sun that shines and germinates the seed and warms the earth, the wind that cools us on warmer days and is captured by the blades of the windmills. Thank you all for all those gathered here tonight. Inspire them and their work for the making of the earth. Guide us in all that we do at this meeting, that we may serve you with courage, love, and conviction. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Nancy, for that opening prayer. So now I would like to, I will introduce our speaker today. Dave Grace, for the past decade, Dave Grace has led educational ministries at the intersection of faith and the environments, including 8 years in PCUSA congregational settings. His work includes the creation of the Youth Faith Conservation Network, supporting high school youth in habitat and energy projects in Raleigh, North Carolina churches, with support from North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, Audubon Society, and the Toyota Together Green Fellowship. Dave currently leads the Youth Carbon Analyst Network program, which he created in 2018 as a program of the Earth Network in National Capital Presbytery to inventory and reduce its greenhouse gas emissions while providing vocational discernment pathways for high school and college youth. Dave's academic background includes a bachelor's from Warren Wilson College in Western North Carolina, as well as the Master of Environmental Management and Master of Divinity degrees from Duke University. He will be entering a PhD program at the University of Michigan to continue his sustainability research on landscape change. So Dave, thank you so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here and excited to see Michigan coming up, as I know very little about Michigan. Let me share my screen though, and I'm excited to share more about what was mentioned, that it's been a learning experience for me, scaling up these types of youth projects to the presbytery level. But I think it's really critical, and though I'm sort of, since this recent project, it's a relatively new focus for me, but I'm increasingly realizing how important that is. So I'll first spend a couple of minutes on the former project, but I'll quickly get to the presbytery scale, and you'll sort of see how my thinking has progressed. So I'm calling my presentation "Greening Your Presbytery Through Youth Engagement," because I want to highlight how, when we're doing the youth work and Christian education, we can be accomplishing the Greening Your Presbytery goals. So we'll see. So 3 parts, just a brief intro about why Christian education is relevant and important to this work with the presbytery level. Then getting into my first experience in this project-based learning, what was called the Youth Faith Conservation Network. Then scaling that up recently, starting the Youth Carbon Analyst program. And it's sort of taking project-based learning, then adding in sort of adaptive management work into these projects. So I'm excited to discuss this with you. Starting out, why is this important? So everyone here, I'm sure, is already feeling convicted by this, but always important, I think, especially, or including people who are already sort of convicted of these things, to share that with others in the church, because I think too often it could come off as a extracurricular sort of thing. And I guess I'm trying to highlight, this is really core to what we are doing in Christian education. So we all know the commandment, don't murder, and the positive implication of, or call to love our neighbor. So today, obviously, we know climate change, species extinction, these are huge problems, and that's the opposite of loving our neighbor if we're contributing to these things. And then we have the further knowledge that it's the poor who are suffering disproportionately, and obviously that is our focus, called to serve the least of these. So centering that in our Christian education, the Earth Care goals align obviously in these ways. We need to do a better job of teaching that. So starting off, getting into this project-based learning idea and trying to share this framing for educators. I guess I want to put it into the framework of Christian education rather than youth engagement, even though my title is using the word youth engagement. So it's really about inviting youth into this community that is engaged in this work. And we all know we're called to be doers of the word and not merely hearers. And that, I take that to be
very aligned with this idea of project-based learning. We're supposed to be doing and not just speaking or teaching about ideas. Okay, so, excuse me. The first project is called the Youth Faith Conservation Network, and it is using these ideas of project-based learning to equip students to be implementing habitat and energy projects in their congregations. So we had some different congregations, I think 3, then we had youth from them involved in creating a project on their own congregational setting. And our sort of network was to equip them with the skills that they would need and the resources to get those accomplished. And I'm going to get into the structure without spending too much time at kind of this individual congregational scale, but I've kept the same structure for the program in my current work. So I just want to highlight that the introduction, the conclusion, having these clear demarcation of the project is helpful. We had an ice cream party, invited everyone to come, including people who are just might be interested. And then we concluded sharing the results of the project. And we did this with a wider network in the Audubon Society. So we had other adults presenting alongside of our youth participants. And then the middle is obviously working on these projects, both a group project, which we focused on distributing nesting boxes aligned with Audubon project for the brown-headed nuthatch. And we witnessed best practices in habitat and energy in area congregations. And just a note on that, I was inspired by my earlier internship with Interfaith Power and Light in North Carolina, where I was working on witnessing energy, both the good practices and bad practices. We went to a coal-fired power plant, and we went to some area solar installations and other things. So anyway, I took that idea and sort of looked around and expanded it to habitat, and we had a nice connection with a biodiesel bus company. So that was kind of a fun activity.
And the students took on their own projects, which I've listed there, and they worked on those in the congregational settings. So just to get into the structure of what I just mentioned, the invitation to a wide group of people in a celebratory tone for the project. You have group projects that you've outlined with clear objectives, the SMART goals. And you allow everyone to participate in these group projects. So you sort of outline a vision, and you have a wide invitation for anyone who really wants to come into this work. And then when you're doing that, you're incorporating education for advocacy in this project-based learning. And then the individual projects give flexibility and freedom to youth who feel
called to do more or feel called to a particular type of work that they would like to develop. So it's a nice, I think, flexibility of having the group option that everyone's sort of available to work on, other than a specialization maybe, or a particular calling that you can help support. And then the conclusion, you create a space where the youth can present their work, hopefully to the Presbytery, and you can celebrate their achievements. Okay, so quickly with the best practices, I think of what enabled this. We had this network with the nonprofit partners and the congregation, Interfaith Power and Light. We hosted regular meetings with the youth cohort. We had mentors for each youth involved. We had a link to kind of subject area experts in their individual project area. And we had congregational support for these students. And I put links in here. I can hopefully send this out to you later, but if you watch their sort of presentations at the conclusion, you can see the transformation, I think, that they brought to their setting, but also in their formation. I think the project-based learning is a kind of transformative for developing leaders on these earth care projects. Okay, so getting into the Presbytery scale, which is where we're all focused, as we should. The Earth Care team you've been focusing on at the Presbytery level, which I'm excited about to be learning about as well. Then what I'm going to describe, the Youth Carbon Analyst Program is a program of the Earth Care team in National Capital Presbytery, but I believe it's replicable. And I would like to see, I think it'd be a nice option for every Presbytery's Earth Care team to have this sort of program. You don't have to call it the Youth Carbon Analyst Program, but basically doing this type of thing, having youth involved while you're doing it. So getting into that. And I guess this sort of extends the project-based learning with these adaptive management, and you're looking at this Presbytery level and you're trying to change the Presbytery by reducing the emissions. So you're doing that in a sort of applied and adaptive way. I think that's the exciting thing about working at the Presbytery. So even though it's a small group within the Earth Care team of youth, I think they might have a higher level of impact by raising sort of the level of ambition within the Presbytery and setting a tone for, oh, we really do want to reduce our greenhouse gases, and we're already going about doing that. So the key tasks are inventorying the greenhouse gas emissions of the Presbytery. What's our carbon footprint? Benchmarking our energy usage over time. There's a tool you can use for that. And then creating, hopefully in a participatory sort of way, a climate action plan or something called something else that does the same thing for the Presbytery. When a date that you want to reduce all these emissions by. So then you can actually have targets and you can actually have accountability, hopefully, along that process. And as you're going, you know, maybe you're meeting your targets, maybe you're not, but you're pushing against the horizon of institutional capacity. And I think, you know, the youth have a good voice for bringing that ambition. And you're advocating not only within the presbyteries or our presbytery, but hopefully extending that to your civil jurisdictions. And hopefully it's a nice way to do that. So the same structure as before, beginning this time for this year, the present year, we brought in a guest speaker from Loyola, I forgot the name of the university, but in Maryland. And she spoke on Let's Talk Climate Change. I have a link to that too. Professor Elizabeth Dahl. So we had lunch and we had the speaker, and then we overviewed the program. Then we outlined our group projects, which are listed there, which are basically along the lines of the things I just mentioned. The things that weren't mentioned were the advocating for climate justice, sharing climate action journeys, things that we can do alongside those previous things. Then students have also taken the specialization part of it to do their own project. Right now, 2 students are working on an article to discuss the recent Presbytery vote in National Capital Presbytery to divest from fossil fuels. They're writing up a report about that. Then also a student last year looked at an affordable housing construction at her church and was considering just energy efficiency aspects related to that. So the conclusion for this year, we're hoping, like at the end of the year, we present to the Earth Care Network. Hopefully we'll do that again this year. Also hoping to present at the Open Space, which is before the Presbyterian meetings here, they have something called Open Space, and they have sort of different topics, but hopefully we are one of them at this upcoming Presbyterian meeting. And the youth can share about their work at that time. So for this best practices in the Presbytery, I think it's all about institutionalizing this project-based learning within the structure of the Earth Care team. Then something we haven't done, but I can see being critical, is having financial support and like a funding stream going towards this work from the presbytery, because obviously you're not in a congregational home, you're at the presbytery scale, so you need sort of a funding mechanism to support that. And there's maybe some creative ideas with like creating a green revolving fund. This is something that would be interesting to me. In addition to having a dedicated fund, tying in the energy efficiency cost reductions into funding for youth carbon analysts, I think that would be a kind of a nice way to incentivize this work, in addition to having a dedicated funding that isn't dependent on that. And then the last thing, making linkages to wider PCUSA offerings. I know I probably missed a lot, but one student is going this year to the Lux Summer Theological Institute for Youth, which sounds like a really good program at Monmouth College. And then something I've done in the past is when I was in college, the Eco Stewards program. And that's a really nice network that was informative for me. That's, as I've gone about this, they actually have it's just like a week-long program, but they have a nice network from people who've been involved in the past. So, finally, coming to the conclusion, why I hope you all consider engaging youth in this way and adding on this type of program, whether or not it's the Youth Carbon Analyst program. I think it does add to revitalizing the church's witness around these earth care work. And to finalize with some of the best practices, things I've observed. When we make the transition from educating just in or on our buildings to using these buildings as a way to teach, I think that's a nice transition. So for instance, we're calculating the carbon footprint of all the buildings in the presbytery. We're not just using the buildings. And we're hoping to engage that. Then hopefully we're remembering why earth care matters to us as Christians. And we're approaching this work through an openness to humility, truth-telling, and repentance. So we're not just reducing greenhouse gases because it sounds like a good idea, but it's really tied into these things that are central about repentance and being honest about our actions and their consequences, and being humble enough to, also the humility part, are we going to do this urgently, or are we going to kind of wait until our city electrifies or puts all renewable sources on our grid and kind of reduces our footprint for us. And then two more things. Inviting the youth into this process of repentance and genuinely collaborating with them, recognizing the different gifts that youth and adults bring to this process and that individuals have. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, linking, if we have a presbytery greenhouse gas reduction timeline and goal, we can link that
to our advocacy in the civil jurisdictions that we're committed to working with as well. So, and when you do have, I think that's a nice testimony you can bring locally. And that's the conclusion of my presentation, but I'm excited to get to hear from you and learn from what you all have found and discuss ways to improve
with engaging youth in earth care in our presbyteries. Thank you. Yeah, and this is my email, so please reference that for discussing this project if you're interested.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave, for that wonderful, informative presentation. Maybe before we get into the questions, would you mind typing that email into the chat so that it's in case someone did not catch that and they want to reach out to you. Does anyone have any questions? There is one question in the chat that we can go to first. So as we're asking that, maybe you can spend some time thinking. But Dave, Bruce Chapman asked, I think in reference to the Youth Carbon Analyst Program, you mentioned benchmarks over time. So what metrics are you using? How do you capture them? And I guess more information about the process.
So yeah, ideally, well, just for the
individual congregation, what we've been encouraging the youth carbon analysts and these churches to use is the portfolio manager tool that EPA has. It's free, but you have to be open to, I guess, it's a government sort of offering. So if there might be some concerns about the data privacy, but I think you can tailor that. But anyway, yes, you just upload your utility bills, the electricity and the natural gas, and you do that for each bill period, and you can obviously and then it takes it for you and shows you the trends, and it's called benchmarking, because you set the initial period, and then after the certain however long it is, you can look at the trends, and it adjusts it by the climate. So if it's a particularly cold period, it takes that into account. It won't. So anyway, it's better than just looking at your bills, just the plain data, the raw data. It does some adjustments. It's called the portfolio manager, and I guess so. When we're taking that from the individual level right now to the presbytery level, we're trying to do a survey of the churches in the presbytery, and basically collecting all the information that program requires, because it asks information about your specific building in order to provide its benchmarking. So we're basically collecting that data with the idea that it could be uploaded as a group, or it could just be held in a different way for that purpose.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have any other questions?
This is Jane. I do have a different question. So you said that you're collecting this data from all the churches in the Presbytery, or at least that's your goal. Did you need to go to the Presbytery, or would it be helpful to go to the Presbytery and get their approval so that churches would be more inclined to participate?
Yeah, we're currently at that stage of, we have designed the survey that we want, the information that we want, but we haven't started with it. So yes, I'm sort of expecting it will be difficult to hear back. And I guess the things that we're, collecting, I should mention, are mostly just like things that would be publicly available anyway. So in terms of the permission, I don't think so. But I think it would be helpful in terms of getting responses back if it was coming from the Presbytery. And I think ideally the Presbytery would have this type of portfolio. It would be something the Presbytery, I think, should have. So yes, I think ideally it would come from them. And I don't know if it would be something that would be good to have required. But I guess you'll have maybe more people voluntarily participating if it comes from that source.
Another question, anybody?
I was more interested in just, kind of recruiting your youth and your experience with youth and motivating them, or that kind of issue.
Yeah, that's definitely, and I think that is important, why I at least wanted to go through the first project, because it is important to, if you don't have youth, it's not gonna, you don't have a youth engagement. So yeah, you have to figure out how to do that. And it's definitely challenging. So I want to acknowledge that, I guess, that it's not an easy thing to create a program or to get a bunch of youth involved.
obviously those are difficult things for churches. So I think one comment I have is that just one thing I've noticed for those who are engaged, they've been, dedicated to the work, but I think keeping the regular meetings has been important to have them stay engaged. So like we've been meeting recently every week, which I think has been critical to keep people on task. Because I think people generally, it seems like, are at capacity with their schoolwork, and the idea of doing additional projects is difficult or might not happen, especially if they aren't having an interaction with a regular frequency. So I think that's one critical thing. And then I guess about the program structure, having that conclusion at the end where you're sharing the results of the work, I think that's also important. So there's something to look forward to. And also there's some sort of recognition around it that their work is important, that people value them and what they're doing. I think those are important things too.
Dave, does your presbytery have a regular youth program that you were able to tap into, or did you have to go out and recruit people on your own? So
I guess at the start of this, I was working as the director of Christian education at a church. So we had sort of a youth program that was small, very small. And the presbytery level, they have, I guess from my different experience between National Capital Presbytery and New Hope Presbytery in North Carolina, Durham, the Triangle area. In that presbytery, I remember that they had a very active youth program. The church there was also very active in terms of its youth, the individual church. But the presbytery had regular retreats, like high school and middle school, I think like maybe twice a year. And obviously Montreat was like right there. So I think that was a different environment to be in terms of the youth engagement. So, and in this presbytery, recruiting youth, yeah, it's a challenge. It would obviously be better, I think, if you had a larger number at your church. And I think contacting the individual youth leaders is the best approach to get youth involved, though they're often having a lot to do, and they're pretty busy as well. So I think that is a challenge. It's definitely a challenge in terms of getting the word out and getting youth involved. But I think I don't have the right answers, but I think it definitely involves working with these different church youth leaders and trying to get their buy-in.
Dave, I do see your hand, but I think Consuelo tried to ask a question before. Do you have a question, Consuelo?
Yeah, I would like for you to expand on that Audubon Toyota Together Green Grant program, the size of it and how do you use it? Because I find, at least in my church, we've been losing children and youth for a long time. And getting them back is difficult. But we have to start somewhere, or it's going to, the church will disappear with us, all this. Also, have you thought on combining the environmental program or creation care with the Bible, with Bible studies, with beginning with baptism to, all the different stages that children go through, and their school, because I'm a bilingual teacher, and in my school, we used to have a very strong environmental program. My children knew a lot, and we apply that within science and, you name it. Everything is applicable.
I guess to take your last point last, that was something first, that was something I've noticed. If you look at sort of case studies about youth engagement, you'll see sort of, like that maybe like a museum has a successful kind of outreach program. They're working with schools. And so I think definitely the school connection and having that is, if like there's something here called student service learning in Maryland, they require students to do a certain amount of like volunteer work in order to graduate. But anyway, I think if you do tie it into the schools, obviously that's where kids' youth are, especially if it's related to or aligned with those requirements. I think that is something I definitely passed over and I shouldn't have, because I think if you do want numbers, probably the largest numbers could come through those types of school relationships. About the Toyota Together Green program, I don't think it exists anymore because it was funded by Toyota, but it was a really nice program because it was funded by Toyota, I guess, and it was hosted through the Audubon Society. So they had like a cohort of these fellows, and it was interesting to meet the different people. It did have a habitat and energy kind of focus with Audubon's work. So they would give like 2 different types of fellowships, I think. One was like $10,000, and it was done through a host organization. So my host organization was the church where I was working at the time in Raleigh, Western Boulevard. So anyway, that also ties into, a lot of the youth budgets in our churches, I suspect, have not so much funding. So investing funding in the projects is also, I think, very important. And yeah, it's something important to do. I think you mentioned something else. Oh yeah, the Bible studies. That is something that I think goes into the project-based learning model in maybe a little bit of a different way, because the traditional kind of Sunday school that I'm used to isn't applied in the way that the project-based learning is. But for the work that I've been trying to do, I have been trying to tie in the Bible lessons, but the way that it comes about is through the context of the project and not through the lectionary or something else that's like not based on what the work is involved with. So I think it's like tying it in is definitely important, but doing it in a way that relates to what's happening in your youth project world.
Dave, your question?
I just wanted to ask Dave when he plans to arrive in Ann Arbor, which is within the bounds of Detroit Presbytery.
Yes. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. Hopefully, I've heard Michigan's having some.
I'm only 15 miles from the campus.
Okay, great. Yeah, this summer. So I haven't defined my exact date, but definitely this summer.
Well, and I did want to mention, though, all seriousness, we do have a position of a youth connections coordinator, and we just had a changeover to a new coordinator at the beginning of the year. So that's somebody that I need to get engaged with and get this information to. And so maybe, I can connect you with that person when you arrive. And I know you'll be busy with your PhD program, of course, but.
Yes, that'd be great. Yeah, and I look forward to meeting you as well.
I'm glad we're helping you network, Dave.
Yeah, I'm appreciative. Yes, that is very good.
Nancy had a question in the chat. She's asking, do you have any written stories about the youth projects or comments from the youth about their projects? And I know that in your presentation, you had a link to, I think, one of their video presentations. But I was just wondering, maybe this is a different, I guess she has another follow-up too. Where the youth you worked with interested in addition outside of environmental activities such as tree planting, stenciling, storm drain, et cetera, that they could participate in as a group. So maybe we'll do that question. But to Nancy's original question, there, we will get these slides out to you so you can click on the link to see some of the projects that Dave and his youth did in the past. Or you can also respond to that, whichever one you want. Ooh. I think Dave might be frozen.
Okay, is it back?
I think so.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, definitely the link, because that was a nice student presentations. And you'll also see, in addition to the 3 from that previous project, the 3 student presentations, you'll see the other Audubon Fellows presentations, and they're kind of addressing that same topic of how to engage young people or millennials, or but they're doing it from their work, which wasn't churches, but they have, you can learn a lot from what these different organizations are doing too. And then what was I going to say? Were the youth you worked with interested? One of the projects that the students worked on was a rain garden at an Episcopal in Raleigh. So they were designing the plantings for that. In terms of like other activities that were more social, obviously we had like the introduction one, which was like the ice cream party or the lunch. So things like that we've done. Regular things like hiking, we haven't done so much, but though that would be a good activity for the social distancing, definitely. Yes, did I address those 2 things?
Yeah. So I do want to thank you so much for all of your questions. Do want to kind of pivot us towards our breakout room discussion time so that we can grapple with some questions that Dave's sent in. I do, before we do that, does anyone have any experiences that they might want to share about how they've been able to engage youth participation in these kinds of issues? If not, you can talk about them in your breakout rooms as well, but this is just the time to share in the bigger group. Yeah, Nancy, go ahead.
I'm very excited that this Sunday, I have 6 kids in my Sunday school class. So it's a very small group, but this Sunday, they're leading worship, and they put together slide presentations on concerns that they have for the environment, for creation care. And so there's a whole worship service and their presentation to the congregation. So that's one aspect of teaching about the environment. And the other is we partnered with Department of Environmental Conservation for New York has a tree planting program where they give out 50 seedlings and you plant them. It's not for individual use, it's a learning project. And we coordinated with our town park, and that's where we're going to be planting them. So that's a little bit of a project, but I hear what you said, Dave, as far as the kids are so busy. It's hard to sometimes find those times to have regular meetings and getting them together and stuff. So that's always a challenge.
Yes, I just agree with, though I think those types of plannings though are a good activity that people enjoy doing. So the nuthatch nesting boxes was also a nice, people liked having that tangible thing they could put on the tree in their congregation or at their home. I thought that was a good aspect of the previous work, that it would be good to find ways to tie in things like that, I think.
I wrote that down. That was an excellent idea. So thank you.
Great. Well, it seems like we already have some ideas about things to brainstorm in the breakout groups. So before we go, I will read the questions there in the chat. Dennis has graciously shared those. So, and here we are. They're coming up on the screen as well. And so the first question is, how does your presbytery involve youth and encourage their participation? The second, how can you raise the youth voice in your presbytery? And third, what specific ways can your presbytery provide opportunities for youth and adults to partner in caring for creation? So we're going to go from this kind of big scale down to just general youth involvement in your presbytery down to the specific of this creation care issue. So let's see. So if you could split us into about, I think there's 16 of us. So let's go with an even 4. Yeah. For about the next 15, 20 minutes. And as you start, if someone could volunteer, or you could choose amongst yourselves who will be the person to report back to the larger group with a quick summary of what it is you talked about. Okay, I think we might have lost one person in the coming back, but thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your breakout room conversations. We have about 10 minutes left, so maybe we can spend about a minute each discussing what it is we discussed. So group 1, I don't know if I don't have it written down, but does anybody have?
I don't even know what group I was in.
Or maybe we can just go through. So, oh, Dave was in group 4.
I was in group 1, but our spokesperson chickened out, I think.
Oh.
There they go.
Rick's our spokesperson for group 1, right, Rick?
Rick, are you able to share?
Mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, while we had a good discussion, we're not real aware of what's going on at the presbytery level with youth, but we did share what we're all doing in our churches to promote youth involvement. And I talked a little bit about our camp that the church owns, which is certainly the focus of youth activities in the summer, not in the winter. It's not open in the winter. We also have 2 quite large scout troops at Westminster, one primarily for members and another Hmong scout troop. We had last year, before COVID, the youth, the annual youth arts month had a environmental theme that several of us on our eco-justice team participated in as instructors and advisors. And I'm afraid I can't remember what others in my group reported. If you would care to tell us, particularly about your. I don't know if she's going to speak up or not.
I think you cut out a little bit there. So.
Well, I hate to leave it just with the activities going on in my church, but I'm afraid my memory isn't good enough to.
Karen, if you had something to say, you're on mute.
Yeah, Karen or.
This is Susan. I'll just say that
Susan.
the only thing I know about within our presbytery is that we're lucky enough to have Dave Grace running the Youth Carbon Analyst program. But other than that, I really am not terribly aware of other youth activities within the presbytery.
For me, we have, they make a concerted effort to get youth to go to Triennium. And we also have a church camp, but it's very difficult to get youth there because the camp is on the far outreaches of the large presbytery that we're in. So that's been difficult. But I did approach our presbytery moderator about Presbyterians for Earth Care. And she was going to look it over and send it to the leadership team of the presbytery. And since our last meeting, our church has an Earth Care team now, and we're working on a few projects to get started on.
Karen, are you in the Mackinac Presbytery?
Yes.
I recognize Ishpeming. I've been there a few times.
Have you? Yeah, we'll come back again.
Well, thank you. I believe that was group one. So I believe I was in group two along with Jane, Susan, Bartram, and Dave. And just to be brief, one of the, we were kind of brainstorming different activities that were going on, and Dave actually shared another thing that was happening in the National Capital Presbytery. So Susan, maybe Susan Berry, maybe something to take note of here. But Dave was talking about another church is doing a climate testimonies project with their youth group. So doing these short video interview style recordings of their youth group, kind of talking about their experiences with climate change, with these environmental issues. If I get that right, Dave, feel free to hop in and correct me. And we also just discussed how much easier it can be if your presbytery has like a certain staff person for youth, or maybe your presbytery has a UKirk university chaplain connection that can help connect you with some college-aged folks. That might be a resource that you could tap into depending on your presbytery. If there's anything I missed, please, the rest of my group, please let me know. But okay, otherwise, moving on to group three, just to someone with a quick summary of what you all talked about.
I'm not sure, but I think we were group three. If that's all right, I'll go ahead. We had a very lively discussion and I think some good ideas. One suggestion was that Presbyterians could join with some other faith communities, Methodist or Lutheran, groups that were in close proximity, and that could be an interesting way, drawing from some different perspectives on environmental care, that it could be an interesting activity for the youth in their environmental work. Consuelo reported that in New Mexico, the youth are involved in the Presbytery Zoom service. However, she said that it was not specifically in environmental things, but Consuela, maybe you could build on that if they could include the youth doing an earth prayer, or including a environmental hymn, or maybe even a moment for earth care, that it might be a way to make steps toward a larger earth care involvement in the service. But it sounded like they do have the regular service, so there might be an opportunity there. Mm-hmm. She also reported that they are making plans to sponsor a youth contest that would include art, poetry, and essays. And in the planning process there, but hopefully she'll report more back to us as they develop that. Sarah noted that she felt the youth were looking for guidance, that the area of involvement in earth care is so big that to make it find doable bits or topics could be very helpful to the youth. Nancy again told about promoting solar energy, and an idea we just got started on, but seemed to generate interest, was having an environmental movie night and make it a social event that might include both adults and youth, or if the youth wanted to take it on as a environmental project for the church and possibly sponsor it, have some popcorn. There are many really interesting environmental movies, and movies seem to have quite a bit of attraction on their own, but possibly do a series of 3 or 4 monthly or bi-monthly environmental movies and make it both a social and environmental awareness possibility. Some of the movies that were mentioned were 2040. Another one was Kiss the Ground. And also the movie that was directed and presented by the, I believe, what is the disaster relief, their movie development section of the National Presbytery Church on the water situation in Flint, Michigan. Mm-hmm. So some of the others of you might have movies to suggest that you could type in the chat, but that seemed to be something that caught some interest, at least in our group discussion. Let's see. Nancy suggested making connection with the youth via Zoom, because many of them are very tech savvy, and that there might be some way of doing that to gather them and maybe expand what's being done, particularly by a local congregation. Just one other idea was, actually, I just thought of that as we were talking, is to apply for grants. There are several grants, and with the change in our national administration and the emphasis that's being put on environment, I would expect that there will be more environmental grants for things such as tree plantings and other environmental projects that could give youth the resources that they need to do some larger projects. So anyone else from the group have oh, there was a resource guide. Please, whoever, was that you, Consuela?
Yeah.
Who was doing the resource guide?
Our church, our Creation Care Committee that we call CCC.
And that was resources for earth care?
It's resources for earth care, resources for carbon footprint measuring. It also has links to churches that have excelled on that within the Presbyterian Church. And it has links and resources and directions of what they do, more or less, and to their websites, to several organizations that work in environmental issues, like Sierra Club, Greenpeace, and some that are local in New Mexico. And 2 or 3 of them are bilingual in nature with Spanish. And I'll be happy to send Jane, the link to download the directory. No problem about that.
Thank you, Consuela.
Great.
Thank you, and that was our report.
Oh, great. Thank you, Nancy. And I think, Dave, you said you were doing, if you could just do it really quickly, one or 2 minutes.
Sure. That's all I was going to do. We talked about camp programs, camp conference centers. Dave, Grace, you'll be interested to know that 25 miles north of Ann Arbor is the Presbytery of Detroit's Howell Nature Center Camp and Conference Center. We get a lot of youth and children out there, but also adult programs as well, and programs open to the public. But we have also some churches that have very vibrant camp programs up in northern Michigan, and I'm a product, and my wife is a product of one of those, Camp Westminster on Higgins Lake. So those are opportunities there to where a lot of the environmental programs are already are and have been for years part of those camps. But also we were talking about campus ministries. We have several large universities. We do have some campus a campus ministry team with a member up in Rochester, where Oakland University is, and one in Ypsilanti, where Eastern Michigan is, and one in Ann Arbor, where, of course, University of Michigan is. And so those are people that we could get engaged with this and see how that meshes with what they're already doing. Another thing that we talked about is urban farming is in cities like Detroit and other Rust Belt cities that have had a lot of land cleared out of the core of the city. There have been urban farms developed, and there are opportunities for volunteerism there, both adults and youth. And so we just need to figure out how to get engaged there if we're not already. And so that's another opportunity. I mentioned that some of you may be familiar with a program called Farm Church. And I saw a program on that through our new church development work group last year, and it was fascinating. And it's going on down in North Carolina, I believe. So that's something to look at just to get some ideas of how to get an urban farming kind of a situation going. Whether you're in an urban area or a suburban area or even further out, that ties in with a new church development idea. But as one of our team members mentioned, Manley, I think that you said, you know, what we need is adult volunteers to help lead these youth programs. And sometimes in some of our areas, some of our presbyteries and churches, that can be a real challenge. So we got to work on that.
Great.
And Dave, Grace, I sent you my email address, so we're good.
Well, thank you very much. As we kind of wrap up, Dave, just any last closing thoughts that you want to share?
One thing, just to hope for that there is more sharing. I guess I'll be hopeful to participate in the future and learn more about what other churches are doing. And I think finding ways to lift up those good examples, I think, is something that would be informative for presbyteries. So I'm excited to continue in this discussion.
Great. Thank you very much. So that's pretty much the end of our time together. We will be gathering again on the second Tuesday of May. Let's see, I just closed my calendar, so let's see what day that is. That will be May 11th, again at the same time, 7:30 in the evening. And if any of you know that you will be able to make it for that meeting, we'd love to have some volunteers for the opening and closing prayer. I know, don't rush to volunteer right now.
Sorry, I'll be traveling. But I'm trying to get other people from the Presbytery and also my church to get on these meetings here.
Yeah, thank you.
Working on it.
Yeah. So yeah, keep that in mind if you know that you will be able to make it next month. And before Susan leads us in a closing prayer, I want to pass it to Jane, who has some announcements.
I'm sorry to report that this is my last meeting with all of you. I am leaving Presbyterians for Earth Care at the end of this month. I just want to thank all of you who have continued to be part of this or who've joined us for the first time. It's just very encouraging. And I think that we've really come a long way. And I do hope that this project will be able to continue, because I feel like it's very worthwhile and there's a lot of interest in it. So thank you to all of you, and I wish you all well. And I just want to remind Jonathan that tell them about the schedule for the summer.
Oh, sure. Today. You wanted me to tell that today?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. So I was going to announce this next month, but we're actually going to take a summer hiatus. So June, July, August at least. Take some time off from these monthly meetings. So next month, our May call will be the last call for at least the next few months. So you can all go out, enjoy God's creation on Tuesday evenings rather than being stuck behind the screen. But we'll have some more information about the scheduling, about that, and when these Zoom calls will pick up in the fall. Is that good, Jane?
That's great. Yes. Just want to give people advance warning.
Is Presbyteries for Earth Care going to do as an organization some kind of summer event?
Well, Dennis is on the call. He might be able to answer that for you. Dennis is our moderator.
There is a virtual conference being planned for August. So stay tuned for more details.
Yes, and hopefully during the May meeting, we'll have some more information about what summer plans
Thank you.
we have. Yeah. Anything?
Thank you for your help, Jane. I'm sorry to see you go.
Yeah.
Yes, if we can all give her a virtual round of applause. Right?
Wow, thank you all. It's been a wonderful ride for me. So thanks for being part of it.
All right. If that is it, Susan, I'll turn it over to you for a closing prayer.
Okay. This prayer is taken from Celtic benediction. Please join me in prayer. For Earth's cycles and seasons, for the rising of spring and the growing summer, for autumn's fullness and the hidden depths of winter, thanks be to you, O Christ. For the life force in seeds buried in the ground that shoot green and bear fruit and fall to the earth, thanks be to you. Let me learn from the earth's cycles of birthing, the times and seasons of dying. Let me learn of you in the soil of my soul, O Christ, and your journey through death to birth. Glory to you, O river of delight, surging through the heart of creation. Renew me this night in the depths of sleep. Set free my dreams of the unknown. Safeguard this time of resting, O God. Enfold me in the darkness of the night. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everybody, for spending time with us this evening. Peace be with you.